Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Can-Am Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video page. And still in the silo. Strange weather up here. Temps dropped almost 25 degrees in one day, and now it's raining heavily outside. So, sounds like it's like somebody doesn't want me to go outside. So, we're good in here. The missing 411 news. Right to you. Just the facts. If you don't follow me on Twitter, you might want to, because it's getting pretty funny over there. David Paulides at Can-Am Missing, that's the name. I posted something over there a while back, and it was about New Zealand. And New Zealand has decided to go to a full lockdown of their entire country over one COVID positive case. One. You might also want to pay close attention to Australia, which came out with a mandate that said that you have to wear your mask indoors and outdoors, and they said you cannot take your mask off or drop your mask to drink a beer. They said this. Okay. In the past, I've tried to pay close attention to those two countries and Canada, because it seems as though the powers to be in our country like to watch the reaction in those countries when those governments flex their muscles. So seeing the response from these countries will be interesting, and then note how we move forward here in the United States. I asked a question on Twitter. I wonder if this is an indication of things to come here. And the responses were unreal. Now, I bring this up because I get a lot of really nasty responses at Twitter. And I know a lot of you folks don't like Twitter just because of that. And I understand. I've been able to weed out a lot of the problem people on this channel that can't be polite. I do not mind contrarian opinions. In fact, that's fine. But it seems like there's a group out there that can't be polite in their responses. And if you don't think like them, you're a problem. Okay. I'd like to see the defense for locking down a country, over one COVID positive case. Don't understand it. And I suppose they have some logic to that. And I won't give my opinion about that, but you may in the comment section of this video. It's my only news for today. We've got a lot of letters and things and cases to talk about, so away we go. We'll go right to the first letter. I've been watching your YouTube channel for a very long time now. While I am so grateful you inform people about safety and share the news about missing persons, I am also very grateful you have mentioned another very dangerous evildoer. Lyme ticks. Boy, folks, we are really careful about ticks, because I've known people that just get their lives decimated by getting Lyme disease. So this is serious stuff. You see, David, my life is very different from yours. I live in New York City, Manhattan to be exact. Many years back, when I went to the east end of Long Island for a summer weekend getaway, it turned out to be rainy. So most of the time I was spent at an open-air restaurant on the beach listening to music, drinking some wine. At one point I saw a strange circular rash on my calf. I thought, what the heck is that? But before I knew, it was gone. To make an extremely long story short, my downward spiral began usually a middle-aged weekend warrior doing CrossFit and fun runs. I became so weak and lethargic that sometimes I would miss eating dinner because I would sleep right through it. I then began to sleep entire weekends. It became more and more difficult to stay awake at work. I went from doctor to no avail. At the 1-year mark that really hit the fan, I became jaundiced, had heart inflammation, my lips spasmed uncontrollably, my arms became paralyzed, and I began to have trouble walking. I went to the hospital, the ER, 3 times. One doctor thought I had MS, others just shook their heads, and one doctor even told me I should see a psychiatrist. Great. Finally, thank God, a doctor thought to test me for Lyme disease. Lyme disease? I thought you had to be in a camping trip in the middle of the forest to get such a thing. I never dreamed you can get it sitting at a posh Hamptons Beach restaurant. Well, you can. This disease robbed me of tens of thousands of dollars, many years of my life, and inflicted so much pain and suffering I can't count. All these years later, I'm still not 100%. If there had been more awareness, I could have had antibiotics straight away and been done with it. It blows my mind that this area is ground zero for Lyme and no one thought to test me. Because it left me with a compromised immune system, together with my doctor's guidance, I have not yet been vaccinated. Now, our Mayor de Blasio won't let me go to the gym and yoga classes. Okay, stop there. There's a pet peeve of mine. One of the morbidities that people have who have a serious side effect of COVID is people who are overweight and out of shape. And that comorbidity can kill you. So when politicians say, well, you can't go to the gym anymore and you can't work out and you can't do this, you can't do that, well, that's keeping you healthy. It's not only keeping your physical body healthy, it's also keeping your mind healthy. Because when you physically exert yourself, you're exerting endorphins that make you feel better. I've stated here many times, you want to change your outlook on life, go for a long, hard run where you sweat a lot. You'll come back thinking entirely different about the world for that period of time. So when they start closing things down like this, it bothers me. P.S. Because it left me with a compromise. Now our Mayor de Blasio won't let me go to the gym and yoga classes. Well, what world is this when they offer you Krispy Kreme donuts to get the vaccine? Yes, they really did. And take away your gym and yoga. We live in a bizarro world. Someday I hope to move out to the beautiful places you show on your channel. Until then, thanks for making people aware of the dangers of tick-borne diseases. Well, hey, thank you for your email. It was a good reminder that everyone should be aware of this. It's a very, very dangerous thing. And I take it super serious. David, sorry to reach out to you this way, but I'm not a social media guy. I recently discovered your channel from Mr. Ballin, former Navy SEAL, who adores your work. Since listening to your channel, I expected to be entertained by X-File themed Hollywood-loving drivel that I can tune into while getting some side projects done. Wrong! Number 1, I found you're a former law enforcement. 2, you don't draw a conclusion, that's for the viewers. 3, your personal loss. After watching 3 straight nights of your channel 411 in Can-Am, you had me sold. So many sad stories that are unresolved. I wanted to share my story with you, not to be solved, but to commiserate my unfortunate and possibly supernatural story. I've never told another person. I also understand the pain of suicide in the family as it relates. I preface my story with I wish God's peace and love to you and Ben's mom, as it is too hard for us to comprehend his absence. I tried to post this to you on YouTube story, but I'm afraid it was too long and not accepted by the post. I didn't know that. Here's my short version of my story. Dave, I see you're in pain. I feel your pain with your loss of Ben. For this, I'm truly, truly sorry. I don't know if my story can help you aside from saying that you are not alone. Please be patient and hear my pain. We may commiserate and heal in our grief. It may not even be the same tale, but the pain is the same. I came to your channel about missing people, etc., and I found I watch your channel because we share similar interests, desire for rationale, loss, and pain. I love you, brother, because sometimes loss of life just doesn't have an explanation. Please keep up your great work with missing persons. I'm a fourth generation of a family that was either a New York City cop or fireman. I just decided to go federal and loving my job, catching the bad guys too, just at a different level. I'm not a social media person, but hoping my message gets to you. And here's the story. My little sister Liz, as I called her whole lives my babysitter, we called her babysitter even when she was married and a mother of 4 beautiful children, 2 nieces, 2 nephews. Her name was Liz, and by life experiences was always my charge to protect. Beautiful, smart, charming, and always hooked me up with her equally beautiful girlfriends for dates. Lucky guy. We called her Baby Sis because raised in a Roman Catholic home, my father made sure we knelt down beside our bed every night and prayed. At the end of Our Father, Hail Mary, and a blessing that was somewhat self-made, we had to cast a blessing for everyone in our lives we wanted to pray for, and always prayed for my baby sister. When my sister and I were in Catholic elementary school, growing up in Brooklyn in the 70s, we walked to and from school since both my parents worked to pay for our private schooling. We were latchkey kids and came home for lunch and back to school after lunch. We couldn't afford lunchroom fees. It was one fateful day I realized how I was designated forever to be my sister's guardian. While on our way back to school after our lunch, a nondescript 80s-style station wagon pulled up alongside us at the curb. As we approached a corner mailbox on East 53rd Street and Avenue L in zip code 11234, the man innocently asked us to drop a bunch of letters in the mailbox for him across the passenger seat. My sweet baby sister reached into his open car to help the stranger. I instinctively grabbed my sister's arm and pulled her back. She always was eager to help anyone. I saw there were no stamps or addresses on the stranger's envelopes. Realizing even at this early age that I was a ruse, I adamantly said we couldn't help him. I tugged Liz away and changed our normal path and walked away in a direction that was in the opposite flow of the traffic and denied this predator to prey on me and my sister. So this is not a Bigfoot or alien abduction story. This is a story of a real problem with children abduction. My story does not end here. Please be patient. This was my first example of being a protective older brother incoming. Why I'm looking for answers in my sister's suicide. My mother was a theologian, researching multiple religions over several years during childhood. My father, a devoted World War II-era Roman Catholic, was extremely devout and not open-minded to my mother's curiosity for religious exploration. We experienced a religious civil war in our house, and the fighting became the norm. For many years, my mom celebrated Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, and at one point, witchcraft. I don't know how this will affect David's viewers. Yeah, how about David? Not trying to upset David's Christian fans because I was forced with this exposure. I'm just looking for answers for my sister's premature and unnecessary death. Please listen as I unravel a tale that still tortures my family today. At this point, my parents' marriage was tumultuous. While we were mere children near the time of our near abduction and we needed the most stability, Liz and I had the most terrifying time when children should be happy and healthy, chasing balloons and laughing. The back room. We had experienced many life-changing things that no one child should ever have experienced. We had each other, and me, being the elder, was raised to look out for her and protect. Most children have imaginary friends. Not to off, but we dismiss Liz's imaginary friend in her back room. She has a girl at her own bedroom. During my mother's experimentation with studies of religion at one point, witchcraft and demonology created an energy no one in my family will even discuss today. Although I'm in my mid-50s, my parents just turned 80 this year. It is still a topic that is deeply buried in bad memories and not discussed. At some point of my parental fighting, sometimes physical on both sides of a statue of the Virgin Mary, was thrown by my mom in defiance to my father's non-acceptance of her religious pursuits. It was a horrible point in our lives. My father was always a good, gentle man, a New York City firefighter for 27 years, and still put his life on the side to help others selflessly, every time. You know what? That's why we all like firemen. They're good people. And And if your dad's still around, you give him a hug and tell him thanks for all those years of service in the horrors that are New York. And I know that they were a horror, thinking about 9/11. My mom, curious and outwardly thinking, challenged common thought, embraced knowledge and curiosity, and didn't really consider the backlash. After many family fights, my mom decided she'd go into demonology, too deep, and decided to eliminate and destroy any material she had accrued. Too late, damage evil was already invited. Some nights my younger brother in the bottom bunk and me on the top bunk were visited many times by a shadowy figure. Initially, I thought I was quasi-awake, and it was my father coming to kiss us goodnight, as he did every night. Dad always would make sure we were properly covered, kiss us on our cheek. Say a simple prayer over us, walk away, close the door. The shadow was too tall, too transparent. It glided to us through a closed door. Its touch was frigid cold, no features, no eyes, no communication, no prayer. When it touched us, it was terrifying. It robbed us of speech and hope, just dread. It was pure evil, even if it tried to mimic my father. We were terrified and rarely slept those nights. My baby sister had conversations in her back bedroom during this period as we mocked her cruelly during her mom's studies. So we have actually been communicating to a soul spirit that was invited by my mom's studies. At some moment in life, one summertime, as I recall, my mother realized maybe by her own experiences that she may have gone too far. Her actions were affecting her children, her family, and her relationships with her husband. She wanted to purge everything. She wanted to throw out all of her demonology and witchcraft. We did that on the day Mom realized this might be a cure, no different than taking out the trash. Spirits, demons, or what you will, are not going to be like the garbage and collected by the city. The satanic Bible found its way back onto the top of the front stairs. We threw it out, and like a boomerang, it found its way back to our front door. Mom asked me to dump the satanic Bible into a neighbor's trash can. I did that day. Eerily, it found its way back to the bottom of our front stairs the next day. After a week of unexplained magnetism of this book to my family, Mom decided to destroy it in our backyard of all things, a hibachi grill. A quart of lighter fluid and scraps of wood to start the small fire. Mom threw the match on the fueled book. This is not a lie or exaggeration. We could not destroy the book. It would not burn. My mother was panicked by the changes in our house. All of our personalities were twisted and unlikely. Our school grades had plummeted. No one could sleep and we were coming apart. Not Amityville horror-like, but we were under attack in an indescribable way that tore a perfectly healthy family apart. My mom and I drove to the peak of the Gil Hodges Bridge, now the Marine Parkway Bridge, and Mom had me get out into the traffic and throw the evil Bible off the bridge, wrapped in a cloth, after blessed by a priest, and strapped to a brick to make sure it sunk to the bottom of the Jamaica Channel. We never saw the Bible again. So we thought. My parents resolved their differences and are still happily married, retired down to Florida after 55 years of marriage and still going strong. That's awesome. My little brother, he's 10 years younger, so even though he's a retired New York cop and twice my size, it's still my little brother. Took over the Brooklyn house we grew up in. Liz married an investment man, an Army lieutenant friend of mine I served with in the Gulf War, and things seemed to be getting normal for all of us. Until I got transferred to JFK Airport. I'm a federal investigator assigned to a counterterrorism unit. I wound up having a lot of late nights, especially the first 5 years after 9/11. Instead of having to drive all the way back to the suburbs to be home, I stayed crashed for a night or two with my kid brother. That's when it all came back, 20 years out of this house, and all the evil came back to punish us. My brother and I had shifts that often coincided so we could get home and make dinner for the other before we were in the house. A good relationship that we always had, just now as adults. Old nightmares. One morning, getting ready for work while shaving, my kid brother had already left for his shift at the 76th precinct, and I knew and thought I was alone at the house. I hate to say this. Looking in the mirror shaving, and I could clearly see a shadow man walk down the hallway behind me in the mirror. I felt as scared as a child and stopped my routine. I went out into the hall in the direction of the shadowy figure. I knew what I saw. I am a grown man. I thought this was over. The house layout is not complicated. A 1930s design railroad house in Brooklyn is very straightforward. It's called that since you have one main hall and all the rooms alternate off the hallway. If someone passed me in the mirror going towards the kitchen, they could either be in the kitchen or the dining room, or they walked through the locked front door, nowhere else. As a skeptic and law enforcement-minded person, I pursued. Did my brother have an overnight guest I didn't know about? Clearly, I wasn't alone. Bath towel around my waist and shaving cream on my chin, I pursued the shadowy figure that clearly blitzed my mirror. No one was there. Empty house, my feelings sheepish. I finished my bathroom regime, shut off to work, never looking into the mirror. I discussed my phantom roommate with my brother, and he said he's had similar situations when he's alone in the house. I often slept on the living room couch to avoid sleeping in that back bedroom. If I slept there, I would somehow be tormented by nightmares. Even as an adult, the uneasy feeling someone was there with you, even sleeping on the couch, long after my brother went to sleep, which was invariably earlier than me. He had earlier shifts than I. I could hear doors opening and closing, the creaking of nearly 100-year-old floorboards as if someone was walking down the railroad hallway. Many nights, night terrors my ass, being strangled in my sleep after having dreams of my siblings suffering with a shadowy figure grabbing my throat and throttling me. I'm grasping for air and just trying to scream out, psychiatrist, psychologist, can kiss my flag, waving ass. Till the cows come home, this is not something that can be dismissed. Sure, the house has a history. Sure, there may be some definition of exposure to marital unbliss. My family has always been tight. We love each other and are religious. No thoughts of mental unwellness and an excuse for any family member. I brought my son down to Brooklyn House, where he was a teen, and offered him a bed in the back room so he could be comfortable and sleeping quarters were limited. He took the offer not knowing the history. Maybe this would disprove my brother and my ghastly opinion. My teenage son came out in the middle of the night screaming that a shadow figure sat on his chest and tried to choke him in his sleep. Just before the choking, he was tortured with nightmares of the most horrific kind, and to this day, he doesn't talk about it. My younger brother has since retired, and by the end of this summer, he will sell that house that had been, for me, 50 plus years of great positive memories, but a real house of nightmares and horrific simultaneously. I won't mind it if it burned to the ground. My brother was packing up the house while getting ready for the move and asked if I wanted any objects in it. I swear in my own eyes, there is nothing I want to take from that Brooklyn house that it might transfer that level of evil into my house or introduce to another. I pray for the next family that moves into it. It has an evil presence that was never purged. The end. My baby sister Liz was unique, belle of the prom and beautiful, a true social butterfly, and could walk into a room of strangers and make friends with everyone in the room. Was successful in school and worked at the United Nations building, Tavern on the Green, and several well-known New York City hotels as their PR liaison. Her personality was overflowing. She could always resolve the disgruntled, disagreeable, and cantankerous. She woke up in the morning and we swore she drank a cup of overexuberance. She was a 5 and 10K runner and competed along with her 4 children in many of the races. She was an active kayaker, paddleboarder, and as a teen was a lifeguard. She was a member of the local neighborhood party committee and forever the center of attention. Unfortunately, David, this is where our stories collide. Elizabeth, Liz, the babysitter, had fallen from this incredible high point. Successful husband, 4 beautiful children, really good looking. She decided at one point she couldn't talk to me, our parents, or my kid brother, and so outcast to our family. We were all so close, and in a snap of her fingers, she wasn't Liz anymore, and she ostracized herself and her family from us. We all lived minutes from each other. We had Sunday dinner together every week. Something inside her couldn't deal, and our family is still reeling from her rejection and the power of her influence over her family against us. We were not allowed to attend her funeral or wake. Private security was hired to repel us. And aside from Googling her headstone, we don't understand why she took her life or kept us from saying goodbye. Our parents, now in their 80s, are crushed not to be allowed to see their 4 grandkids or the tragic truth of having to bury their own child. The sadness runs so deep, and after her death, Just before the COVID lockdown in the US, we struggled to understand something we may never comprehend. I've worked in a group home on a temporary basis that had varieties of mental illness. My wife of 27 years is still in the mental health field, helping children with autism. We cannot understand my sister wanting to leave her parents, husband, and the rest of us behind. Ben left you as Liz left me. I'm plagued with the guilt, and I didn't do something to help and protect her somehow. I didn't see the signs when I should have. I'm no expert, sir, but my theme to get through Liz's senseless absence is I must continue and be stronger for having her in my mind. I've given up on the church for a long time ago, but I strangely find myself connected to God in a more personal way. I want for there to be a higher power, a way to comprehend why a person chooses not to go on and to surrender to another place in the world. Who is truly to say what is right or wrong? Life is given to us, and maybe it is up to each individual to decide what to do or where to go with it. Maybe Ben and Liz have found a higher plane of existence, and someday we will all be reunited. Sounds better than floating on a cloud or playing harps, at least to me. For the sake of keeping Ben's memory, do what you do. People appreciate missing 4-1 in the Cam-Nam. You were PD, and I don't know a brother in blue that listens to criticism. You were born with thicker skin than most. We have to protect those that deal with the travesties of life. This is our legacy. Carry on and protect the populace, even when they hate us for it. Stay strong and brave. I'm proud of what you stand for and for what you must endure. God bless and be well. That was a tough one. It was a real tough one. As I stated a few videos ago, if you're suffering from mental health, and all of us do at some point in our lives, nobody's happy all the time. And you actually think about taking your life, you're gone and you may be okay. You may find that lifestyle in heaven that is perfect in the way it's supposed to be. But what you leave for us here, and I've told people this, it's almost living hell. Every day I fight it. Every day I fight it. And every day is a struggle. And I'll keep fighting back. One of the last videos I made, I said, hey, I hope I see you next week, and if all goes well, I will, and if not, it'll be fine. And I think some of you took it that I may do something to myself. I won't. But I said that because YouTube has already put a rifle shot over my bow. That I can't believe they're a villager of ours, but somebody was listening, complained about these. And they said that it didn't meet the social ramifications of their site, and I've got to change it. And they demonetized me for a period of time. It hurt. It hurt. And I'm more actively now than ever looking for some other site to move to. And like I've said before, to find a website, YouTube, whatever, where I can put my videos and the site doesn't own them, I'll go there tomorrow. And the reason being is that I feel like I'm handcuffed every time I talk. And I think there's powers out there that don't want me to talk about mental illness I've gotten a lot of complaints lately. I don't know if they're from bots or they're from paid trolls or whatever. It's pretty depressing. So, a number of years ago, I was doing some research on missing people, and I came across a story out of West Virginia. And I think it's pretty interesting. And it came from 1895. Let me read it to you. It's pretty good. Not since the treacherous Gauley River rose suddenly in the night and swept scores of the mountaineers living along its banks to its death in the icy waters of Webster County been so excited as it is at the present. From way down Cherry River to the remotest settlements of Sugar Run in the upper part of the county, the mountaineers are talking about a gigantic bird which has been terrorizing the section for the past week to 10 days. About 2 weeks ago, a child of Dan Jenkins, who lives over in Bergoo, B-E-R-G-O-O, some 15 miles from this place, this girl disappeared in a manner which for a time puzzled the oldest hunters and woodsmen in the county. It is now regarded as an absolute certainty that the child, a girl 10 years old, fell prey to a winged monstrosity, which, for want of a better name, the mountaineers called an eagle. Now, it wasn't an eagle, folks, but that's what they're calling it. Little Landy was sent by her mom one Friday afternoon to the cabin of Joe Warnock, a mile and a half south of that of the Jenkins house, to ask Mrs. Warnock, who had been sick. The girl started soon after noon for the Warnock cabin, but never reached there, and vanished as completely as if she had been spirited away by a supernatural power. As Landy did not return by 4 or 5 o'clock, Mrs. Jenkins grew uneasy and sent her husband to look for her. He thought perhaps she had remained with the Warnocks and went straight to the cabin. There he learned that the child was not there. By that time it had become dark, and assisted by the Warnocks, the Jenkins started to hunt for the daughter. Nothing could be seen of her, and the whole party returned to the Jenkins cabin. As there were several inches of snow on the ground, the tracks of Landry could be plainly followed. They were followed to a point within a half a mile of the Warnock cabin, where they suddenly disappeared and could not be seen any further. So the girl walked towards the cabin, just disappeared. The point where they stopped, there was a cleared field where buckwheat had been grown last season. The child must evidently have been. For the tracks left the path, and where they stopped were some 15 or 20 feet away from where there had been a number of tracks together, as if she had turned around and around while trying to avoid something. Beyond this point, the footprints disappeared. The search was continued far into the night, and the surrounding forest was scoured as far as possible, and it was thought the child might have wandered from the path. The searchers were compelled to return to the almost distracted mother with the news that the missing child had not been found. The next day, the search was continued by a number of others who had heard the story and had come to volunteer their services. Searched as closely as they could beyond the footsteps in the snow. At one point near the path, they could not be followed any further. How the child could have vanished and left no further trace puzzled everyone. If she had been seized by a wild animal, its tracks would surely have been left in the snow, but there was nothing of the kind. There was no explanation to be offered, and the mystery of the disappearance was not revealed until several days later. Peter Swadley, a noted bear hunter from Webster, is now in the village being treated for the wounds he received from a huge bird over in Laurel Creek day before yesterday. He is still in a precarious condition from the encounter. Swadley had brought to Addison by a Kitzmiller in the afternoon of the day it happened. Swadley was hunting a bear over on Piney Ridge and had his dog Gunner with him. The two were tracking a bear whose haunts Swadley had known for some days. Through the laurel on the mountainside, when he came into a little clearing, and suddenly, without other warning than a scream louder than that of a panther, which Swadley thought he had just jumped on him, the immense feathered creature swooped down with the evident intention of bearing him off. The bird dug his talons into the back, tearing his coat to shreds. and for some minutes there was a fierce fight in the snow. Swadley lost his rifle and did not get a chance to use it, or the hunting knife he had. Though he is a large, powerfully built man, he had no chance with his bare hands, and his wounds showed that a fight for his life must have been one of the worst wounds the hunter received over the years. One to his left eye and to his scalp. Swadley managed to retain his footing in the snow, though nearly lost consciousness, and strove to ward off the blows of the eagle's talons, which nearly tore him to pieces. Swadley's dog Gunner was probably the only thing that saved him from being killed. The dog was off from his master when the bird attacked, but when Swadley shouted, it returned and made for the eagle. The latter turned from the man to the dog, and Swadley says that with one stroke of its powerful claws, ripped open its stomach and flew away with the poor creature whining in its talons. Almost blinded by blood which flowed from the wound on his eyes, the hunter continued to find his way down the mountain to the cabin of Abe Kitzmiller on Little Laurel Creek, a mile or more distance from the place of the conflict. He stumbled into the cabin, nearly dead from the loss of blood. Kitzmiller was at home, and after he had bound up Swadley's wounds as well as he could, he put him on his horse and brought him to Atkinson. Owing up to the fact that the bird came on him so suddenly and nearly blinded him at the outset of the blow of the head, Swadley is not able to give much of a description of it. Its strength, however, he declares, was prodigious and twice as lifted him off his feet. Its body, it says, is as large as that of a man. If it was to come again, how would I have to pick her up? Doesn't make sense. It's bad wording. Rube Neuheiser, one of the county deputy sheriffs who lives over in Spruce Creek near the foot of Owlhead Mountain, and his son Haynes had a stranger experience with the eagle last Thursday. Ruby and his son started out in the morning on a deer hunt. As the light snow had fallen the night before, it was a splendid time to track this game. They had not been out but 2 or 3 hours when they ran across a trail of a doe and a fawn and followed them around the base of the mountain, across on Piney Ridge, down to the laurel beds on a little branch of Sugar Run. Expected to find the deer in the beds, as they had evidently been out feeding the night before and had gone. They thought into the beds for the rest of the day. Contrary to expectations, the tracks led through the laurel, where they were followed into difficulty into a forest of hemlocks. From the facts that the hemlock branches were so thick and the day was so dark, it was hard to make out the trail. Neuheiser knew the place well, as it was a favorite crossing for deer along with a normal animal route. The two men had nearly gotten out of the forest and reached a clearing which had been made by fire burning in the trees for several acres when they heard a terrible commotion ahead. There were ear-splitting screams. They hurried to the edge of the cleared spot, and 200 yards away saw the doe and the fawn with a tremendous bird of some kind circling above them and pouncing down, first on one and then the other. The bird was of immense size and was emitting the screams which he heard. The doe was vainly trying to protect the fawn. Neuheiser and his son were so astounded at the sight that they simply stood and watched. The fawn was bleeding fearfully, and the doe was trying to ward off the terrible attacks of the eagle. The latter would circle up, they said, in the air 50 to 60 feet and then swoop down to the deer. As the two men looked, the bird suddenly wheeled down and, fastening its talons in the fawn's body, flapped its wings and sailed away, apparently with ease, over the tops of the dead trees. Neuheiser put up his rifle and fired a departing shot without effect. They watched the bird, which flopped its wings until it had risen some distance out in the air, then sailed off toward an almost inaccessible fatness of snaggle-tooth knob. The doe stood up as if dazed when the men approached and did not attempt to move away. It was found that its eyes had been scratched out by the eagle's claws and was so badly wounded that it could hardly stand. Neuheiser cut its throat with its hunting knife, and its hide was found to be torn into ribbons. Neuheiser and his son say that the bird which they saw was of immense size and that its wingspread could be 15 to 18 feet. Its body, they say, was as large as that of a man, and its cries were loud and shrill to the extreme. The feathers were of a dark brown color with white on the wings and light underneath. Its eyes were tremendously larger than those of the largest sized owl, and they shone with terribly brilliancy, plainly discernible from where they stood and watched. This was the drawing that was made for the article. Pretty interesting. Now, I've had comments over the years about the disappearances in my books, and people say, oh, maybe it's a giant bird that took him away. No, not one time in any story has a child been found with talon marks, injuries consistent with being carried by a bird. And that would have to be the case for a bird to pick up a small child. So, while that story is interesting, it doesn't apply to any of my work that I've ever found. And I do look for that. So, let's get into two stories. They're in the same area. They're in northern New York by the Adirondacks. First one has to do with a young man, 20 years old, named George Atkinson, Jr. He went missing March 17th, 1973, Mount Marcy in the northern Adirondacks of New York. He was from Chicopee, Mass. He worked in a department store. He was described by his sister and the dad as being very athletic, very outdoorsy, loved to hike, loved to backpack, was very comfortable in the wild by himself. He left home on March 13th, told his dad he was going to northern New York, Mount Marcy area, and he was driving his car, about a 5-hour ride for him. Said he'd be back the following Saturday. Well, when he didn't come back Monday, Dad was still worried. Tuesday, he notifies New York State Police in that Mount Marcy area, and they start looking around. Right away, they found his car at a location near Mount Marcy. Then they started doing some investigations. In the meantime, the family in Mass was talking to the friends, trying to figure out exactly what he was doing up there. Well, they found a friend that said that he was going to climb Mount Marcy. Okay. Well, Mount Marcy, 5,340 feet, 44 feet in height. Now, to the people of northern New York, that must be a monster mountain. And it is the biggest mountain in New York. But coming from Montana and Colorado, that's really not a big mountain. I mean, 14,000, there's dozens of those in Colorado. And there's tons of mountains around where I live that are over 10,000 feet. So, but it is the biggest mountain in New York. So, when they found the car, first two rangers went in. There was a 12-mile round trip from the car to the top of Mount Marcy. And they ran into 11 groups of people on that hike. And nobody had seen George. That was troubling. They came back, they got more resources. Well, they found a log at a location where the trail starts, and they found his name. And he had signed in there on March 14th. And, I'm sorry, he had signed it on March 14th. It was found on March 26th. At this point, they had hundreds of searchers, helicopters, canines, friends. The weather in the area was good then. There was a 2-week search. They found nothing. And that was very odd. Now, if you look at Mount Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, on Google Earth, you're going to look at the woods around there, and some of the thickest woods you can imagine. Now, it's a very well-defined trail going to that mountain. Very well-defined. You're not going to get lost. But something happened. What? Don't know. But that So he disappeared on March 17th, 1973. Fast forward. April 12th, 1976. A man named Steve Thomas, a 19-year-old guy who lived in the northern Adirondacks, was with 5 friends, and they wanted to climb Mount Marcy. They went to Onondaga Junior College, and they decided they were going to all hike it together and maybe spend the night. First ascent of that mountain was made in 1837. Again, not a real tough one per se. Most people could do it. And as they were climbing up the mountain, they got up to a location called Hopkins. And Hopkins is like a little shed where people can sleep in and get some comfort from the elements. Well, they all sat in there drinking tea, and the group decides to spend the night. And Steve's sitting there drinking his tea, looking at a map, and he tells his buddies, "Hey, I'm just going to go up the trail a little bit more." Nobody really gave it two seconds of thought because Steve was such an advanced climber, excellent shape. Before he left, he put on a yellow raincoat, real bright yellow raincoat. And because the weather was supposedly going to get worse, that's why they were going to stay there for the night. Well, 10 o'clock at night, the weather did get worse. And Steve hadn't returned, so his buddy said, "Hey, we're gonna hike towards the mountains." So a few of them take off, and not far up that trail, they get blown back by heavy winds and super cold night. So they get back to the lean-to, and half of the group decides to go to the summit, and half the group was going to go back at 3 o'clock and look for him. And then the other group at 3 would go back to the car and get help. Well, they went to the summit, they didn't see anything, calling his name all the way up. And then the guys went back to the car and got assistance. One of the more interesting parts of this story is in the middle of the night, when the guys were in their tent. One of the guys had brought their dog, and they made a special note of telling people that in the middle of the night, the dog started whining, wouldn't stop, wouldn't go outside, and stayed right next to all the group of guys, wouldn't go near the front door of the tent. And they thought that was super weird. That was a very big oddity. The search for Steve Thomas was one of the biggest searches in the history of New York up till that date in '76. And to think that they weren't going to find Steve wasn't on their books. Helicopters, New York Department of Conservation, New York State Police, canines, multiple jurisdictions all came in there and covered that mountainside. Well, they didn't find him. Steve had a brother named Bob Thomas, 7 years older than Steve. And he didn't live up there. But after his brother disappeared and after all the search and rescue was over, Bob moved into the northern Adirondacks with his life goal to find his brother. Well, as he was out searching, and he searched nonstop for weeks, he ends up finding something pretty unusual. So let me give this to you first. This is George Atkinson. Again, he was 20 years old, disappeared March 17th, 1973. And they confirmed that he was climbing Mount Marcy. Again, there was a massive 2-week search. They don't find him. They don't find anything, any remnants of him, nothing. That's Steve Thomas, 19 years old, disappears April 12th, 76 at 3:30 in the afternoon. Same deal, never found, nothing. Horrific. So in July of 76, about 3 months after Steve disappears, Bob's out crisscrossing the wilderness every time he has a chance. Every second. And the rangers that worked that area got to know Bob. And they told the press that there was nobody they knew in their agency and state agencies that had an inkling about that mountain better than Bob. He had been all over it. And he was going to continue all over it until he found his brother. Well, again, July 76, he's in a place called Panther Gap. And he finds the skeletal remains of someone. And I know that there's no doubt in my mind that he thought he found Steve. Brought the rangers back in. They did a forensic analysis. They never released the findings on the cause of death, but it was George Atkinson at the bottom of Panther Gorge. Now here's a real mystery to this. Let me give this to you, okay? Start up here. So this is the Adirondack LOJ. It's like a lodge area. This is where George parked his car. This is the Marcy Dam trailhead, and George signs in right here. And he takes the trail up to Mount Marcy. Panther Gorge is on the far side of Mount Marcy. This is the gorge. This is where George is found, at the bottom of the gorge. Now, if he climbed that, he knew the way back to the car in safety, because he was a super experienced backpacker hiker. And the trail is like a freeway. I mean, it's not big, but 4 or 5 feet wide, dirt that's down straight into the dirt. You can't miss it. How did he end up over here? What happened? It was never really addressed. But I find it odd. So the canine behavior on Steve's case, very odd in my book. To me, it's super suspicious. Thousands of hours of searching. Weather played a big issue on his case. Lack of a scent trail by the canines. I just can't get it. I just can't wrap my mind around what happened to either one of these guys. When Steve told his buddies that he was just going to go up the trail, he never said he was going to summit. He said he was just going to go up the trail. What was just up the trail? And I remind you folks, point of separation. The minute that Steve separated from his group, something could have happened. Because he wasn't going to go that far, remember? Just up the trail a bit. So Steve Thomas, 19, George Atkinson, 20. After the coroner determined that that was George's skeletal remains, they had a ceremony on the mountain, on Mount Marcy. And George Atkinson Sr., George's dad, and Steve Thomas's dad met for the first time on that mountain. And Mr. Thomas told Mr. Atkinson that he felt like he had known him for a lifetime. And Mr. Atkinson thanked Mr. Thomas for his son's unending effort to locate his brother. But in turn, he found George. But Steve has never been found. When you really think about that, it's been almost 45 years. It's bizarre. Really bizarre. Well, those are the stories today. A little bit of news, some good letters, and an interesting bird story, I think. I appreciate you being here. And always appreciate the thumbs up. And you do me a favor by passing on the messages to people that we are here to help. And I will continue doing the best I can from where I'm at. If I'm not here next week, it's not by choice. It's because I was taking down my YouTube. Let's hope that they have patience and empathy. And in the meantime, you know anyone that's going to go on a hike, take a personal locator beacon, tell someone where you're going, when you're going to be out. Take extra water, extra energy bars, and a whistle. And remember, all you have to do is you hit the videos on my Can I'm Missing channel, and you can get up to 150 different videos about missing person cases. Hints how to get yourself in shape and carry the right items while you're on a trail. And there's some trailers to our movies. Our movies are still available on YouTube Movies, Missing 411, Missing 411 The Hunted. And please, please don't buy my books on Amazon. You're going to get ripped. I just got a comment today that one book they saw for $150. No, my books are $24.99 on our site. So those are just resellers trying to rip you off. And if you do see people ripping off the content of this channel while you're watching another channel, please post a link back and tell the people, hey, this is the channel. Put a link in there about how they can find me. I'd appreciate it. So, thanks a million for being a friend. Let's keep the village rolling. Have a great day.